morning, members. Welcome to the meeting of the Badenoch and Strathspey Area Committee. The first item of business is appointment of chair. So I would invite nominations for chair, please.
Russell, would you be prepared to be nominated?
What's your thoughts on it, Bill, with going forward in the next year or two with I mean, I think the hottest topic is possibly going to be the short-term lets. Would you be better placed to be leading on that?
Only on a temporary basis, Russell. I explained at the last board business meeting that I wouldn't do this permanent. I'm struggling for time. I'll be happy to do it for a wee while if that suits you, but I'm not happy to do this for the next 5 years.
I'd be happy with that. I mean, I'm happy, for the next, I don't know, we can discuss a time period, but I mean, I'm happy to take over. I mean, I'm happy to go vice and I'll take over. But I think for the next wee while, I think maybe the biggest topic is going to be the short-term lets, and I think you'd be better leading on that.
Okay, but it's on the basis that you'll be expecting them to take over at some time in the reasonable future.
Happy to do that, Bill, that's fine. Happy to do that.
I second that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And for
Okay, so
can I just and Russell's the vice chair, taking over from Bill in a period of time.
Yeah. So you get that, Lorraine? It's
So just to,
it's unfortunately me, proposed by Russell and seconded by Muriel, and then Russell proposed by Muriel and seconded by John for the vice chair.
yeah, got that. Thank you, Chair. I'll hand over to you now.
Okay, thank you. There are obviously no apologies for absence. And item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Were any previously noted declarations?
No, Chair, I haven't received anything.
Anyone from any of the members?
No.
No.
Then Russell's about to get his first ever chance to chair a meeting, because I declare an interest in item 9 of today's agenda as a director of Cairngorm Mountain Scotland Limited, and I will not take part in deliberations and will leave the room. There were no, item 4 on the agenda is recess powers. I can confirm there were no recess powers concluded. Item 5 is the appointment of subcommittee working groups, etc. And the only one that's under item 5 is the Badenoch and Strathspey Committee partnership. I'd like to propose Councillor Coburn.
Thank you.
No, I'll second that.
Okay. Can we no other nominations because there's not enough of us? So you're duly selected.
Thank you.
Item 6 is appointment to outside bodies, and I think there's a lot more than that, but I'm sure we can work our way through it. The Badenoch and Strathspey Local Access Forum. Can I have a volunteer for the Local Access Forum?
Not that.
I'll propose Russell then.
I'll second that, yeah.
Explore Abernethy, I've been on it since, I suppose, forever. Quite happy to continue if that suits it.
Yep.
Need a proposal in a second.
I'll propose you.
Just a second.
I'll second that.
Okay. That's item 6. Now we move to item 7, which is the police performance report. I think online we have.
It's Alistair McLeod, Chair from Police Scotland.
Alistair, I'll just hand over to you then. If you can.
Morning,
hear us
Chair.
okay.
Morning, Chair. Thank you. Morning, members. Nice to see you all today. I'm working on the assumption that this is probably the first area committee of this council, if not certainly the first one that the police have reported to. So you've got a new area commander and also a new inspector for Badenoch and Strathspey and Nairn, probably since the last time you received a report. So you've got both of us here today, and let me just first very briefly introduce myself. So Alistair MacLeod. I was previously, for a couple of years, I was the inspector in Aviemore around about 10 years ago. Certainly, Chair, you were on the council yourself, or you came onto the council at that point, but the rest of you I don't think I've met before, so nice to meet you all. Craig Johnston's now the temporary inspector for Badenoch, Strathspey and Nairn, based out of Aviemore, and I'll bring him in a second. So beyond that, really, you've got the report. It seems a bit strange at this stage in late August to be reporting on last counting year's performance figures, but that's where we are in terms of the reporting cycle. So these figures go up to the 31st of March 2022. What I've asked Craig to do is run through the report with you, and I'll chip in and assist with any questions that you want to ask during the presentation or indeed after the end of it, and I'll have one or two things I want to mention myself as well. So with your permission, I'll bring Craig in now.
Great.
Hi, good morning everyone. Craig Johnston, as the Chief Inspector said. I've worked in Aviemore and lived here for the last 5 years, so just taking over from Vince Took now. I'll run through the report, as the Chief Inspector said, starting with road safety and road crime. You'll see that the figures for drink driving and speeding offences have reduced quite significantly. And other than to say that this is part of an ongoing reducing trend, it's difficult to proportion any rationale for that. But over the last 5 years, both of these figures have been reducing steadily and quite significantly, which is good to see. You'll see that I made comments in the report that we're grateful for the regular presence of the Roads Policing Unit in Aviemore, Kingussie, Granton and surrounding areas, and I have to say that they are here in unmarked vehicles and in marked vehicles on a very frequent basis, which I'm grateful for. And further in respect of road safety, living in Aviemore myself and working here, I notice regularly as the darker nights approach the concerning behaviour of some cyclists going about without sufficient visibility and lighting. So I intend to link in with our preventions interventions officer as those nights approach and get a campaign going to try and please be aware that this isn't to persecute any cyclists. It will be purely educational to try and increase the visibility, because I do fear that that there will be further serious incidents involving cyclists. There was certainly one on the A95 between Aviemore and Boat of Garton last year, which unfortunately left a youngster with very serious life-changing injuries. And we want to prevent that going ahead. So as the darker nights come along, I best will start a campaign to tackle that. Furthermore, in respect of road safety, I'm in the process of having a number of officers trained in the use of speed detection equipment to keep all our road users safe from speeding motorists. If I can move on, are you happy enough that I just move on from from part to part, move on to antisocial behaviour now?
Yeah, just carry on, and if there are any questions, we'll try and answer them at the end.
Okay, thank you. So the antisocial behaviour, you'll see from the information provided that the figures are relatively static with minor fluctuations upwards and downwards. Detection rates remain extremely good. There were an increase in the number of assaults, but this is in comparison to a very low number last year. And the latest figures are still well below the 3 and 5 year averages, which is good. In respect of another localised aspect of antisocial behaviour, which I'm really aware of, because it's been quite high profile in a local context, is the boy racers essentially in Granton. To make you aware, there's been a vast reduction in the number of reports of antisocial behaviour, which is undoubtedly due to local officers and the assistance of road police, and a number of operations were carried out in the reporting period to reduce the antisocial behaviour. But I'm conscious that it is an issue that can could quite easily flare up again. So we'll continue to take measures to keep on top of that. Acquisitive crime, again, as can be seen from these figures, there's been a decline in the number of house break-ins and car crime. Of note, however, I see that there's an increase in the number of frauds. This is a trend which is reflected nationally, unfortunately, and the detection rate you'll see is quite low there compared to the other acquisitive crime detection rates. And the reason for this is because these offences are almost always committed by people out with our area, and indeed often abroad, which makes it extremely difficult to investigate and bring people to justice for. Something I plan to do to help with this is, again, with the help of our preventions and interventions officer, is to start or advertise the fact that we're going to be present within local banks, starting with the Bank of Scotland and Aviemore, to invite people in who may be vulnerable to this type of criminality, to discuss the matter with them and set a whole day aside for a police officer to be in a bank. In respect of Grant and Kingussia and other areas, we can obviously look at other banks, but other perhaps public buildings in other areas which don't have banks at the moment, depending on the success in Aviemore. Also, because I live in Aviemore and know a lot of people here, I'm often asked about the theft of bikes in the area. There's clearly a high public perception that this is a bit of an issue, and it was. There was a period of time where there were a number of bikes stolen, often of extremely high value, which rightly got the attention of the local press. I'd like to reassure you, and I do reassure members of the public whenever I have the opportunity, that this trend has ceased. There has not been any reports of bikes to the police for several months now. It was a sudden spike for which there are positive lines of inquiry, but just to reassure yourselves that this is there has not been any reports of thefts of bikes for some time now. Protecting vulnerable people. It's good to see that in terms of percentages, a reasonable reduction in the number of sexual offences in the area. Unfortunately, and following national trends, there's been an increase in the number of domestic incidents. And just to put some perspective on this, the reason is that the police are increasingly using the Murov doctrine for domestic incidents, whereby we will go back to previous partners to see if they also suffered domestic abuse, which will then help corroborate newly reported incidents. And it's because of this that the figures have undoubtedly increased, because we're being proactive and we are going out of our way to seek historical domestic offences to corroborate newly reported ones. So that's certainly part of the reasoning for that, and that's been reflected nationally. Serious and organised crime. It's always difficult to identify the true reasons for the fluctuations in figures in drug supply offences. Is it because there's a reduction in drug supply in the area, or are there other factors involved? What I can say from my own experience, which includes 5 years in the drug squad in Aberdeen as well as 18 months in the drug squad expert witness unit, is that we're genuinely exceptionally lucky in this area when it comes to serious and organised crime. Yes, there are drugs issues, and we must never ever become complacent about them, and we don't, and we take every opportunity to deal with drugs matters and serious organised crime. But it's great to live in a place where these issues aren't out of control, for sure, and long may that continue. In terms of counter-terrorism, in respect to this, there isn't much I can add other than to say that there's significant efforts ongoing to help keep the public safe through the use of the prevent strategy and the contest strategy. And that's probably a summary of my summary.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You mentioned cyclists, just an example this morning. Obviously, there's been a great deal of, I suppose, newspaper headlines, etc., about how drivers are being, I suppose, forced into paying more attention to cyclists. But I think the same works the opposite way around. You know, this morning, a young gentleman riding along the pavement on one side of the road, heading in the same direction as me, came off the pavement and went 90 degrees across the road, right in front of me. And the reason why? Because he was wearing a pair of headphones. The only thing he had on his head was a pair of headphones. So, you know, we can do as much as we can to protect them, but sometimes they really just got to think about it. But the main thing I wanted to speak about was the fact that, whilst it's out with your reporting period, we've had 5 road deaths on the A9 in a relatively short period. And 3 of those were at a junction that I think everybody locally, whilst they would not say it's a dangerous junction, it's a junction we worry about. So I would ask, are you working with the Council, Transport Scotland and yourselves to see if there's anything that can be done to improve the safety of that junction?
Absolutely. I think Mr. Porteous is on the line, and I'm certainly be very keen to get in touch with him and discuss the options around that, and clearly linking with roads policing. It has been a horrendous few months in terms of road deaths, as you allude to. Over the first 3 years I think I worked here, there weren't any road deaths on the A9, which was largely attributable, I think, to the speed cameras. But you're absolutely right. It's been, I've attended them myself. It's awful. So yeah, I would be delighted to link in with Mr. Porteous and Roads Police and see if we can get a meeting together to discuss that junction.
That'd be good. Thank you. Hey, Muriel.
Thank you for the report, and it's good to have you have Police Scotland back. Just on the theme of the cyclists, the local police have had a great track record in education and supporting our schools, and attendance is there for the young driving. And would that include now some cyclist guidelines because of the risks, bearing in mind it's getting dark at night now, and we have got this penchant for wearing dark coloured clothing for whatever reason. So I think it would be really helpful if you've got the resource with your community police team to work with our cyclist organisations in our schools, because we know that it works relatively well with the drivers. The other 2 other quick points. The domestic abuse is Police Scotland have done some great work in that. Are we okay for resource based in Aviemore to deal with that? We used to have 3 officers sort of in a small team. Is that team still intact? And my final sort of point is the continued encouragement for members of the public to use the 101 service, because people tend to forget how valued it is. It's really important that we can gather data, and 101 is a good way to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, so in respect of the first point about cyclists, as you'd expect, as a new inspector to the area, I've got lots of ideas and things. And one of my ideas, last week I personally submitted in excess of 30 training requests to have every police officer in Aviemore and Nairn trained in the use of police bikes, because we've got funding for police bikes and associated equipment. So I think once I get that done, in fact, why not prior to having that done, we can have officers going down to the local primary school and indeed Kingussie High and Granton and engage with the young people about cycling safety and so on. But it might have the added impact, the fact that these police officers will also be trained and kitted out, if you like, in cycling cycling kit to enforce that. So yeah, can absolutely see to that, have these schools visited and people educated, linking with the school liaison officers to assist with that as well. In respect of the domestic abuse team, yes, there is a team of, I don't know how many, I actually think there's more than 3 now. They're actually based out of Nairn, but they're responsible for covering this area as well, including a detective sergeant, a domestic abuse task force. They're an extremely busy office, as you'd expect, and they do provide coverage to Badenoch and Strathspey on a regular basis. as well. In respect of the 101 service, you broke up a little bit on my line about the obtaining of data via the 101 service, I think was your query.
Yes, it's just to encourage people to continue to use 101 because we don't have police offices in all our villages now, and the 101 is a service that is available, and it does give us access, or you access to data and trends locally.
Absolutely, and there are people who are able to scrutinise that data and get the trends, as you say, from it. I don't know if you want to provide any more information about that, Chief Inspector.
Yeah, 101 in particular, we're well aware it's been quite contentious over the years, and certainly in previous areas I've worked myself in the division. There's been, it's fair to say, mixed feedback about it. Our ability to influence what that looks like going ahead is pretty limited as a local division, but there is kind of, again, I'm well aware of myself of having had anecdotal feedback from people about the length of time it takes for the phone to be answered, for example, and then how difficult it is to negotiate the menu system thereafter, and a feeling that might actually disproportionately disadvantage certain members of the community. And also we ask people to use the Police Scotland website to report non-urgent matters as well as an alternative to 101. That's actually really effective, in as much as it takes away the need at all to wait for a phone to be answered or to go through a menu system. It's just a quick online form, and then it gets dealt with and prioritised in exactly the same way. But again, that's not something that every member of the community is going to have access to or be confident using. So we've got work to do on an ongoing basis in terms of gathering that sort of feedback, but totally agree with the councillor that we need to be encouraging people to use 101. I would hate to think that there was a reduction in confidence at this stage of Police Scotland in our ability to deal with calls that come in via that method. So from time to time we do as a force, we do media pieces around how the various methods of contacting the police, and if you think that it's timely that we do something like that in Badenoch and Strathspey just now, we can certainly consider that.
Thank you.
Russell.
Yeah, Craig, thank you very much for your report. My name's Russell Jones. I was quite surprised, slightly surprised actually, that the drugs issue doesn't actually get its own heading in the report, and also that you said just now that you didn't think it was out of control. I would actually disagree with that. I think the amount of Class A drugs that are going around our communities is quite frankly unbelievable. And the knock-on effects that we see that in terms of mental health and depression, etc. I don't know if you have any comment on that, or if you think there's more could be done in that. But if you don't think that there's a lot of Class A drugs going about our communities, then I'm really, really surprised, to be honest. I've got two other slight points, possibly the first one's connected. That would be good to see a bit more community policing in Grantown, Kennussie, Newton Moor, the areas out with Aviemore. I realise there's a problem with resources, I realise that you guys are stretched, but certainly going back before the police station in Kennussie, Newton Moor were closed, I live in Kennussie, we always knew who the local policemen were, or policewomen. That's not the case now. We don't know them, we don't really see them. It would be good if they could attend community council meetings as well, and that would be a good way for getting feedback from you guys, and we could also feedback to you, and community councils could. And also the last point was the fraud advice. I thought that was a really interesting initiative that you were talking about, doing that in the bank in Aviemore. I know especially a lot of older people have great concerns about fraud, but I would really encourage you again to please do that outside Aviemore. If you're going to do it in Aviemore, then please also do it in Kennussie, Newton Moor, Grantown, Nathy Bridge, etc. So, but my main point is really the amount of Class A drugs that are in the community. Thank you.
Okay. So we do get anecdotal evidence information about Class A drugs, particularly cocaine, ecstasy, and other recreational drugs. Recreational drugs are clearly cause significant mental health problems, as you mentioned. We get very little, if any, information about crack cocaine and heroin in this area. I'd be very interested if you were able to, we could perhaps speak afterwards, provide me with any information about those. As I mentioned, it's anecdotal information and evidence, and we can only act on information and evidence which is given to us. We're out clearly in high visibility on a Friday and Saturday night when recreational drugs are used most commonly, and there is a reluctance, as there is everywhere, to provide the police information about that. We often get told there's drugs in Aviemore. What are you doing about it? And then you ask that person, can you give me a start for 10 and tell me who's selling those drugs? And the response is always it's your job to find that out. And people are always reluctant, often understandably, to give us information and specifics about who's dealing and so on. Although we do have an idea about who might be selling cocaine, ecstasy, and other recreational drugs. Please don't think that because I'm referring them as recreational that I don't consider or don't know about the serious harm that these drugs do, but they're considered a recreational Class A drug as opposed to heroin and crack cocaine, which are non-recreational. Why is it not given a specific heading in the report? I don't know. I guess that serious organised crime is overarching heading that's been decided upon. But you're probably quite right. It does maybe deserve a title in its own right. There is significant work goes on to tackling drugs issues in this area, as there is everywhere. But we are seriously limited by the information that we're able to get or that we are provided. In terms of the fraud advice, yeah, as I said, so I think the trial period, as I mentioned, could be in Aviemore. It could equally be in Granton or Newtonmore, Nethay Bridge, Kingussie, wherever. Absolutely very keen for that to happen, and you're absolutely right that the most vulnerable are the elderly and also those with mental health issues to be the victims of that type of crime, and that it destroys lives, the amount of money which these people are unfortunately often defrauded of. Community policing, there is no reason why police officers should not be attending community council meetings, and if that's the case, I need to know about that. But going forward, designated officers will be attending these individual community council meetings, and I'll be ensuring that that's the case. In terms of designated officers for particular areas, we in Badenoch and Strathspey are all police officers for every area. That's the way. We don't have a Dalwhinnie police officer, for example, but each council meeting will have a designated officer to attend there. Hopefully that answers a couple of those points.
Can I just maybe, Chair, come in on a couple of these points as well, please?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Councillor. On the matter of drugs, you talk about Class A's, and yeah, I mean, we're well aware locally and as a wider trend of the prevalence of particularly cocaine as a recreational drug. My concern in particular is around, and I mean, it's well rehearsed, but the drugs death figures nationally and locally, and as I said, I'm new to the area, so I'm not quite across exactly how Badenoch and Strathspey is directly affected by this in recent months, but I know from my own recent experience that a lot of the deaths that we're seeing due to drug use are not directly attributable to a particular Class A drug, and that actually more commonly the common factor is the use of benzodiazepines. So your street Valium, and in particular Xanax, which we're seeing a lot of in the Highlands just now, which is particularly potent, your street Xanax. So it's just to highlight, yeah, your point's not lost, and we're well aware of the harm that drugs do in the communities. The one thing I did pick up on myself from the report is that in terms of our proactive activity targeting drug use, the number of searches is down year on year, but the number of positive searches is up. So the reduction in the number of searches is, I think, a reflection of COVID effects, when we were actually prevented from doing using stop search tactics for periods during lockdown for very obvious reasons. But the fact that the proportion of what we're doing that turns out positive indicates that we're acting on good intelligence. But more concerning for me is the reduction in supply cases, which is evident from the figures there as well. So that's something that Craig and I need to look at closely, along with our colleagues in Intel and CID, because it does indicate maybe we're not doing as well as we could be in terms of targeting those who are bringing drugs into the community for the purpose of supplying them. And from my point of view, I'd far rather that's what we're targeting, rather than using stop search to pick up people for possession cases. On the fraud prevention side of things, I just wanted to say there's a really, really much wider piece of work for us to do, because, as Craig rightly pointed out, the detection rate for these crimes isn't good for the reasons that he said. It's particularly difficult. So prevention needs to be the key for us, and the banking protocol is one aspect of that. But the thing that's really frustrating for me is to see how often people are falling victim to the same scams. And so we just need to keep putting the message out there about these are some of the common MOs that are doing the rounds just now. And I've just come off a duty weekend where we had frauds that are actually classed as extortions, which is really common, where people are befriending folk online, being persuaded to engage in sexual activity on camera, and then having money extorted out of them. That's proving almost impossible to detect, because they're invariably the suspects in another part of the world, and we never get to identify them. That is happening day in, day out. And lots of the other more common ones, emails getting hacked. So somebody gets an email purporting to be from a friend who's in trouble, needing money urgently, and asking them to buy vouchers, Amazon vouchers, Google vouchers, and send them the codes. These are coming in every single day, and we're putting out lots of preventative information about these MOs, but people are still falling victim to them. The banking protocol, which Craig's talking about promoting, is really, really effective and already works better in some banks than others, because it's entirely dependent on the staff of a particular branch buying into it. But some of the banking companies are really supportive, and there's been lots of examples recently around the Highlands and Islands where banking staff have stepped in because they see a vulnerable person taking large quantities of cash out repeatedly, and they intervene to try and prevent it, and they do actually end up picking up on a fraud from that. Regarding the community councils, yeah, very briefly, Craig's right. Sometimes we struggle to resource a police officer to every meeting, but at the very least, the community council secretaries should have a named contact within the police station who is their police officer for that community council, to whom they can pass any direct concerns, and to whom they can put a request to attend a particular meeting if there is business there that's relevant. So we'll strive towards achieving what Craig's saying there. I think that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, can I just go back, and I'd just like to thank you both for those answers, and also just, I know how difficult, I assume how difficult it must be to actually get to the supply, but I'm led to believe, it's not even a case locally that there will be dealers, obviously, but I think they can actually order it on their phones now and it just gets delivered to their house. And I don't know how you counteract that. So it's not just a case of somebody living in a flat who's a local dealer. I think it's it's more sophisticated than that now. But anyway, but thank you very much for your answers. Yeah.
You're absolutely spot on, Councillor. There, I've just come away from having been the area commander in the Western Isles for the last couple of years, and it used to be relatively good pickings getting supply cases coming into the Western Isles off the ferry and the plane, and that's almost non-existent now because everything's being ordered online on the dark web, coming in through couriers or even just by post, and we're picking out we're intercepting a very small quantity of it. But the justification to actually intercept somebody's mail requires to be fairly significant. So I don't know if you would say that it's more or less sort of a complicated process, but it's certainly, you're absolutely right, it's becoming harder and harder to pick them out. But like I said, that reduction in supply cases is something that I'll be looking at as the area commander.
Thank you.
Thank you. Of all the cars stopped, what's the division between people that have been taking drugs and people that are drunk? To my way of thinking, the breathalyzers are a very good way of quantifying the level of drunkenness. Do you have similar tests for drug testing?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't have the figures in front of me as to how many are responsible for drink driving, but there's certainly a vastly increasing trend right across the country in terms of drug driving. Yes, we can take swabs from people which are analysed and determines which drugs they've most recently taken. But there's also specially trained officers can go along and carry out an assessment of that person depending on their sobriety. First of all, we determine that there's no alcohol involved, and then we do tests to establish if they're likely to be on a form of substance. It takes a bit longer to prosecute because we've got to wait for lab results to come back. But yeah, there's a formulated, well-practiced way of dealing with drug driving.
Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, thanks both for your time today. Maybe, Craig, if it was possible, we can exchange contact details, because in the past, Vince has obviously kept in touch on a regular basis and let us know what's been going on, and we can do the same if we could exchange.
Absolutely.
Some contact.
No problem.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Members, item 8 on your agenda is adult social care provision in Badenoch and Strathspey, and I think we've got Maria Dixon with us, and yes, we do.
Yes, good morning everybody, and hopefully you've had sight of my report. So I was originally asked to report on daycare provision, but after a discussion with Fiona Malcolm, we agreed, because it's quite difficult to see daycare provision in isolation, that it made sense to report on adult social care provision generally in the Valley. So that's how I've structured my report. So there is a common theme throughout, which is that actually, and it won't come as any surprise to members, that actually things are pretty difficult at the moment in terms of delivery of appropriate adult social care. But I'll take you through, and we can then later discuss, if you want to, any of the issues that I raise. So I'm going to start with care home provision. You will be aware, obviously, that both Mains House and Grandview House went into administration earlier on in the year, and we went into a planned closure situation with Grandview House in Granton-on-Spey, and eventually closed the home in May, towards the end of May of this year. As it went as well as these things can do. Obviously, it's never an ideal solution to have to move people. We would not want to do that, but we didn't have any alternative because the home clearly was not fit for purpose and was not going to be a viable option for anybody to buy. So we set up a project team, and that team worked really hard with families and local providers and more far-flung providers to ensure that everybody was rehoused appropriately. What I can report is that all the residents that wanted to remain locally, or whose families wanted them to remain locally, we did actually manage to do that by using the care homes that were already in the Valley. We did have some people who chose to move their loved ones closer to them, to other parts of both Scotland and England, actually. And all of the people that were moved have had their 6-week review, which is a statutory requirement, and are generally doing really, really well in their own home, in their new homes. We've only had one person who went to England who we had to move again because the home they went to couldn't cope with them. The other thing we did as part of that managed closure was to link in with the staff. That was actually my role, and because what we wanted to do is, knowing that this was a really good bunch of staff, we didn't want to lose them to other sectors. And again, all of the staff who wanted to remain in health and social care were actually supported to find alternative jobs. Some of them came to the NHS, some of them went to other providers, but that process actually went as well as can be expected. So what that leaves us in the Valley is that we've got the 2 in-house care homes. So that is the Wade Centre in Kingussie, which has residential beds but also offers a small amount of respite and intermediate care. We've got Grant House in Granton-on-Spey, which again is residential with a small amount of respite and intermediate care. We've got the private company Line Moor, owned by Parklands, who are offering nursing and residential provision within Granton, and they have limited respite provision. And we currently have Mains House in Newton Moor, who are also nursing and residential with limited respite provision. All of the care homes are experiencing enormous challenges. I can't understate the amount of challenges that they are having with recruitment and retention of staff. And there's a lot of work that we're doing both within our own care homes and within the independent care homes to support them around how can we attract and retain staff into these positions, particularly since the pandemic has sort of eased, and staff who quite happily came in to work for us and work for independent sector providers during the height of the pandemic, because tourism was closed. Some of them have gone back to tourism, and so that is a particular challenge. It's also a particular challenge, as you'll be aware, because of affordable housing and transport links. Particularly what we're seeing is for Newton Moor and Kingussie, it is very difficult unless you live in those areas to actually get there, and the fuel crisis is creating further difficulties for staff in terms of being able to afford to put petrol into their cars to come to work. So it is a really difficult situation, but in terms of the in-house homes, both of them have had very good grades from the Care Inspectorate recently. So despite the challenges, they are still maintaining an excellent level of care. As you know, Mains House is still in an uncertain position and is close to admissions while decisions are being made about that. So I'm unable to comment further other than to say that NHS Highland is supporting quite a lot with their care planning, which was picked up by the Care Inspectorate as not being adequate, and with staffing through our care response team. Obviously, the loss of care home beds in Granton, we did manage to place those people, but having lost those beds for the future and having the embargo on admissions in Mains House actually does present challenges with hospital discharges. So that has been an ongoing concern for us. We have actually just managed to move the 2 people that were in hospital waiting for care homes. They've just moved in the last week, but it does create a problem with reduced capacity within care homes in the Valley. Moving on to care at home. Again, you'll be aware that independent sector provision has been really difficult in the Valley over a number of years. During the height of the pandemic, we actually had some providers come in and wanted to work with us and did take on some packages of care, and that worked really well for a short period of time. Unfortunately, as with the care homes and with lots of posts, they have not managed to, the independent sector providers have not managed to retain their staff, and so they have gradually over the last year handed back packages of care and refused to take on any further packages of care. So with the exception of the Richmond Fellowship, who is supporting people with ongoing mental health problems, care at home provision now in the Valley is completely delivered by NHS Highland. So what we've done is that we have expanded our in-house care at home team significantly to take on those packages. That's not without its challenges. So what you'll see in the report is that we do still have a significant number of unmet need hours in care at home. This is as a mixture of things. It's the independent sector withdrawing and us having to very quickly step in and take over those packages. But obviously we have an ongoing increasing need for people to receive care at home. So as part of the redesign of services, when we opened the new hospital, we did actually enhance the care at home team anyway. We took some money out of budgets that were allocated for other things to enhance the care at home team and to enhance our enablement team to ensure that, so enablement is a period of 6 weeks, hopefully, where there's intensive input from allied health professionals and nursing and care at home to enable people to reach the maximum level of independence that they can, to reach their potential, so that then the ongoing mainstream care package that they need is hopefully not as high as if they hadn't had that input. So we have now our care at home team has 2 strands to it. It has that enablement strand, but we're also having to deliver ongoing mainstream care because of the lack of independent sector providers. As with the care homes, the challenge that we have is recruitment. It is easier for the NHS to recruit staff than an independent provider because our terms and conditions are just not matched by the independent sector can't match them. But even with that, it has been really difficult to recruit, and it feels like there is a permanent advert out there to ask people to apply. So we do have a small number of people in hospital waiting for care at home. So moving on to daycare. So prior to the pandemic, you will probably be aware that daycare was delivered from 3 sites in the valley. So we had our Wade Centre in Aviemore, Glen Centre in Aviemore, which is a pure day centre provider. And then prior to the pandemic, we also delivered a small amount of daycare from the Wade Centre and from Grant House. That had to be stopped on government advice during the pandemic because of the concerns around bringing in infection into our care homes. And actually that our in-house care homes did remarkably well in keeping COVID at bay during the pandemic. They really did. But we had to stop delivering daycare from, well, actually all daycare stopped, not just from the residential homes. But what we did for people who were previously getting daycare is those people who wanted it, we looked at creative solutions. We did some delivery of lunches from the Glen Centre, which people found very helpful. And our social work teams worked with service users and their families around different ways of supporting people at home. As the COVID restrictions started to lift, we were able to eventually reopen the Glen Centre. That was despite, again, significant staffing challenges. We've had quite a lot of sickness and absences, and we did have some people leave. So we did reopen to a small number of clients. I think it was May of this year that we restarted daycare at the Glen Centre. And what we were doing there was bringing people in using the minibuses from the care homes to bring people in to attend daycare there. In terms of looking at reinstating daycare from the care homes, what we were asked to do as a government instruction was to do a risk assessment of what that would look like. And the risk assessments that were completed around both Grant House and the Wade Centre made it very clear that it is not safe to continue to deliver daycare from those centres because A, we can't staff it because of the staffing challenges, and B, it is impossible to, because of the layout of the home, to actually keep a safe enough environment for infection control to continue to deliver daycare from those 2 centres. So what we are currently working on is expanding provision at the Glen Centre. What we found, interestingly enough, is that some people who previously had daycare actually preferred the various solutions that they were working with around care at home and other things, and didn't want to come back to your traditional somewhat old-fashioned day centre provision at the end of the pandemic. But we do have a number of people across the valley who would benefit and do benefit from that. So the plan is that the Glen Centre will be the site where daycare is provided for the whole of the valley, and we will use minibus provision to bring those people in. We can actually provide, the assessment looks as though we can provide up to 14 places per day. So that is supporting a significant number of people because people don't tend to want to come every day. So we have different people coming on different days. And we're going to review that on an ongoing basis because what we're finding is that actually if we have people with a lower level of need in terms of their ongoing personal care during the day, it is possible to have slightly more. The absolute maximum as designated by the Care Inspector is 18. But what we're finding with our levels of dependency at the moment is that we can cope with 14 per day. Now, we're not actually providing that at the moment, partly because of demand, but also because of staffing issues. But we are actively recruiting at the moment. We've got adverts out at the moment to try and recruit to those posts. And I would hope that fairly quickly we could move up to maximum capacity there. In terms of wider health and social care provision, it's probably just worth mentioning, obviously, the new hospital opened in Aviemore in September. That was a massive undertaking for all services, including the Highland Council services that had to move from where they were previously based into the hospital. But what it means is that we now got everybody co-located in the same building, and the benefits of that in terms of team working, communication for children's services, mental health, adult social care and other health services is immeasurable. But what we want to be really, really clear on is that despite the fact that we have co-located people in one building in Aviemore, we absolutely need to make sure that all teams have full visibility across the whole of the patch. Part of the deal we made with the local communities with the closure of the 2 community hospitals was that we would continue to look at community provision and ensure there was visibility of staff around there. So we've actually got good links with the GP practices in both Granton and in Kingussie, and adult social care staff are obviously visiting people in care homes. We've got care at home out and about. So we're keeping that under a really tight review because we want to make sure that we're not disadvantaging anybody by centrally locating the team. So that's probably the summary. I think the main thing that I really wanted members to be aware of is that we are now in a situation where we have significantly reduced independent sector provision, both for care at home and for care homes, that we have had to move daycare to one site, but that we are looking at building on that and doing that in as person-centred way as we possibly can, and just to recognise that the ongoing challenges around recruitment and retention are huge, and we're having lots of discussions around what we can do to try and encourage people to come and work and stay within adult social care in the Valley. So I'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that very comprehensive report. Members, any questions?
Chair, thank you, Maria. Just the proposal for the Glen Centre, is the capacity of 14, is that enough? What does that meet the demand and projected demand? I've got 2 questions, so that was one question. The other question is, do we know how many out of area placements we have with people that are being supported in different NHS areas? How many do we have that need to be brought back in locally?
Okay, so the answer to the first question is at the moment it looks as though 14 is sufficient. I think it's very difficult because there hasn't really been anything offered during the pandemic. It is difficult to see that, but we've not got lots of people knocking on our door saying, can we have daycare? So I think at the moment our sense is that is adequate, but it is something that I would want to keep a very close eye on, because yes, if it isn't, then we then need to rethink what are we doing and how are we supporting people. What I would really hope moving forward is that we can really work in the spirit of the legislation around self-directed support and not be confined to you get daycare, or you get this, or you get that. There are lots of different ways that you can support people, and I think we need to be very creative around that. So there are pilots in other areas, not in Badenoch and Strathspey, but there are pilots of community-led support hubs in other areas, and there is quite a lot of talk around, and I can't remember what it's called, but certainly in Murray they're trialling, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like almost like foster care type arrangements for adults. It's got a type. That's it. Shared lives. Thank you, Muriel. Yeah, shared lives. So we're looking at that. I would be quite excited about that. Actually, I think that has lots of potential to deliver different things. So at the moment, we think that 14 is going to be okay, but I would want to keep an eye on it. So that's the answer to the first question. The second question, I don't have the numbers to my fingertips, Muriel. I don't think there are very many from the Valley that I am aware of, but I could certainly find out and come back to you on that.
That's great. The shared lives, thank you, Maria. The shared life things is working well in other parts of Scotland and in the UK, actually. The feasibility study for the Highlands, they're due to report, I think, in September. So hopefully we will get something in that. So, but that's great. And we may have to scale up. And the reason I'm saying that is we're worried about the winter fuel and the cost of fuel, and it may be something that we need to just be very aware of, that people will be very cold and need a hot meal somewhere. But thank you.
Hi Maria, thank you very much for your report. I'd just like to ask a couple of questions around the Wade Centre and Grant House. I mean, are you saying that you don't have any plans to reopen them for daycare in the future? I mean, I understand what you're saying about the staffing problems. I mean, that's sort of well documented, and it must be difficult. But obviously, it's slightly worrying for people in Badenoch and this end in Strathspey if we're to have no daycare provision going forward. At the moment you're saying it's down to the risk assessment and it's down to lack of staffing, and you're looking at upscaling the Glen Centre and Aviemore.
Yeah, so it's predominantly because of the risk assessment. So the risk assessment that we are currently expected to work with makes it clear that, and we're not, this is the same in all of the in-house care homes across Highland, that we are having to think about different ways of delivering daycare because of the risk assessment around infection control. But it doesn't mean that people in those localities are not having access to daycare. They are, because we are transporting them to daycare at the Glen Centre.
No, I understand that they're being transported to daycare at the Glen Centre, but then you go on to say when the hospital in Aviemore opened, you'd said to people in Canusie and Grantown and the areas round about there that there would still be provision in these areas, and then we seem to just be moving everything to Aviemore. Everything seems to be moving to Aviemore. I just wonder, when is that risk assessment? When is that done again? I mean, do we go another 6 months down the line? Do you look at the risk assessment again and think that you could restart daycare in Grant House and the Wade Centre, or is that going to be it for good now?
Well, I imagine, to be honest with you, that as things change with COVID-19 and as we move more to living with it, the regulations and the rules will change somewhat. So yes, the risk assessment is a live document that we would continue to be revisiting and having a look at that. And if there was a particular issue around people not being able to be taken to Aviemore, then we will continue to relook at that. I'll be completely honest with you. At the moment, my priority is, on a day-to-day basis, is having enough staff to keep the residential clients in the Wade Centre and in Grant House safe. But as that hopefully will improve, I'm an eternal optimist. We will continue to review it and have a look and see whether that's something that we need to do, and equally to look at other, is there anything else other than bringing people into a residential setting, because the advantage of doing that in the past was that for somebody who was maybe hovering on the brink, just about coping at home, if they did go to daycare within a residential setting, it gave them a little bit of an introduction, and they could start to think about, well, is this somewhere I could see myself living? And I recognise that we lose that by not being able to do it. So I suppose I would never never say never. I think it is something that we do need to keep under review.
Yeah, no, that would be good. I mean, if you could keep it under review and obviously look to, I would ask if you could look to reopen the daycare and respite care at Grant House and the Wade Centre. And I mean, it can't be particularly environmentally friendly either to be running minibuses up and down the valley all the time when you've got places. You know, it's interesting that it says on, is there any environmental impacts? I can't remember on the report, and it doesn't say anything. Obviously there is when we're running minibuses up and down the valley.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, in terms of respite, again, during the pandemic, we had to stop respite. We had to stop planned respite, but we have continued to do emergency respite. And actually, both care homes have been used quite a lot for emergency respite in recent weeks, actually. So we are providing emergency respite. We are still waiting guidance on planned respite, but I would really hope that that is back up and running soon. And I would want to protect our respite beds because I think that is really, really important for local families. I think looking at data from pre-pandemic, quite often it was people from other areas that were using the homes for respite. And I'd quite like to think about when we move back into planned respite about is there a way of giving priority to local residents?
No, I agree with that. Thank you very much, Maria. Thank you.
Any further questions? Maria, thank you very much. It's good to see you here today, and a comprehensive report is always welcome. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and feel free to invite me again. All right, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.
Members, we may now move to item 9 on the agenda, and I will withdraw.
So item 9 on the agenda is Corrynakees Road parcel deletion. And I think there's Richard coming in to speak about this. Are you with us, Richard?
Yes, I'm here, members. I'm just hoping my video will spring into life now. Hopefully you can see me.
Yeah, good morning, Richard. If you want to talk us through the report about the Corrynakees Road parcel deletion, please.
Thank you, members. Yeah, so this report is about the partial deletion of the U2284 Corrynakees Road, which is the road that takes traffic from the ski road up to the Corrynakees car park. At that point where it enters the car park, the road now turns right, as it has for a number of years, and when you bear right, you're then on the link road, as we call it, which continues to take you on up the hill. But at the car park entrance there, the U2284 continued on through the car park, roughly to the far end where the lift station used to be, and then the car park was around the road. The main thoroughfare through the car park was originally part of the adopted road, and that was still the case. So recently, Cairngorm Mountain Scotland Limited put in a planning application to redevelop the car park as an overnight facility for motorhomes and camper vans. So as part of that process, it was acknowledged that the road description should be amended so that it made more sense, so that the adopted road stopped at the entrance to the car park, and therefore the stretch that went on through the car park was to be unadopted. So this report summarises that, and therefore members are asked to approve the proposed partial deletion of the U2284 Corrynakees Road to complete that administrative process. So that's really it. There's a map in the appendix which shows what will be the new description of the road. Basically, as I said, taking it from the junction with the ski road, where it leaves the ski road, as you bear left around the hairpin bend, and then it will stop at the entrance to the car park, and that will be the new amended description of that section of road, which will keep things right in the list of adopted roads. And also in the appendix is the new description and the old description for reference as well. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Any questions?
What's the cost implication for this, Richard?
Really very little. We're talking about 180 metres of road, single track road. So that will come off our road length, which is submitted annually to Scottish Government. So there will be a very slight decrease, corresponding decrease in our grant award, but equally we will not have that maintenance burden. So the two will cancel each other out. So there are no cost implications at all.
That's great. Thank you.
Excellent.
Any questions, John?
Now, who will be putting in the facilities for these motorised homes and things? Is that
yes, it's all. Sorry, Councillor, for interrupting. Yeah, no, it's Cairngorm Mountain Scotland that are putting in that facility. They own and manage the car park there.
Right. Okay. And that'll include showers and lavatories and all that sort of thing.
Yes, I'm not really in a position to answer that. Cairngorm Mountain would be able to answer that, but I think it's basic electric hookups and waste disposal, but no showers that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, of course.
Richard, just sorry if this is a daft question. So where's our snowplough going to be kept? Is still, the one we've got for the hill? Is that,
yes.
There's no impact on that as well?
No impact, no. At the moment, yes, Highland Council, we run our own fleet of snowplows, and they're all kept between our depot access at Granton-on-Spey, Aviemore and Kinussie. And then the Cairngorm Mountain Scotland Limited have their own, a couple of snowplows of their own, and they're usually overnighted down at the garage at the Glenmore snow gates, or one of their operatives takes them home to Aviemore. So they shouldn't have any impact on that either.
Okay, sorry, I do apologise. I thought we had a co-ownership agreement with one of the snowplows for the Cairngorm, or am I completely wrong?
That's the snowblower, actually. Yeah, you're right.
The snowblower, yeah.
Yeah. So they're currently not using the Keist car park for storing snow ploughing equipment. They're all either up at the top at Corrycass or they're down at the Glenmore garage. So this won't have an impact on that.
Yeah, but we've got access to the snowblower for other parts of the ward or even the Highlands, should we require it.
That's true. Yes, that's very true. We have first.
Dibs.
First, that's the word. Thank you. Yeah, we have priority. Yeah, should we require it? That's correct. That's quite correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
So are we happy to approve?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so we're happy to approve that, Richard. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, members.
Thank you, Richard. I think it's him again.
Yeah, I think it is. Right.
Okay, members, we're going to move to item 10 on the agenda, and I take it back to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members, this is the report which comes to committee annually describing the winter roads maintenance service plan for Badenoch and Strathspey area for the upcoming winter 2022-23. So members are asked to approve the winter service plan. There's a fair bit in the report, I guess, so I could summarise it briefly. Just really to point your attention to the particularly appendix, the map in the appendix, which outlines in Appendix B, I think it is, which shows the how the roads in Badenoch and Strathspey are prioritised for winter maintenance. So the key is red is primary, blue is secondary, and the green are all the other routes. And then the other appendix, Appendix A, is the Highland Council's winter maintenance policy, which describes in section 3 that the treatment of roads, local authority roads, takes place between 6 in the morning and 9 at night. And after 6 in the evening, that's generally restricted to primary routes. And target treatment times for primary routes is 8:30 in the morning. It also details the weekend service on a Saturday and Sunday. And all the other details are in there as well about treatment of footways and what happens on the public holidays over the festive season. It also describes the resources that we have available to us in terms of operatives, basically scooter drivers, and we have 9 of those in the area. We used to have 8. So thanks to the recent extra allocation of revenue to our service, we're able to employ an additional driver. So that's great news. There's always been considerable pressure on our roster in meeting the winter maintenance service, and that's coming under even more pressure lately as we look to all the latest developments with drivers' hours regulations. Thankfully, winter maintenance still comes under domestic rules rather than European rules, which definitely makes sense and helps us in delivering that service. So probably ask members if they have any questions rather than go on anymore, because it's all laid out fairly clearly in the report. Thanks, Chairman.
Richard, you picked up the bill for trunk road pavements for winter maintenance.
Trunk road winter maintenance? That's
pavements along the edge of trunk roads. So the pavements of trunk roads, bearing in mind they're within 3 metres of the carriageway.
Yes, that is done by the trunk road operator. So Transport Scotland pay for that, and then the trunk road operator carries that out. So in Kingusie and Newton Moor, that's Bears is the operator there. Interestingly, one thing I could say, I suppose, to develop that, since you mentioned the trunk road operators, if I may, is that we continue to work closely with partners. It was mentioned in the other item that we're working closely with Cairngorm Mountain Scotland on the ski road, so that will continue this winter as usual. And then we have our depot sharing arrangement with Bear Scotland in Kingusie. They obviously cover the A9 and the A889 and the A86 trunk roads in the southwest of our area. In the northeast, the A95 used to be Bear, but under the 5th generation of Transport Scotland trunk road contracts, Amy now have the northeast contract. So that's another partner we'll be working with. It's a more limited opportunities for partnership working up that end of the area, but we do sometimes have salt sharing arrangements at our Granton-on-Spey depot there. And of course we work with the other local authorities that neighbour us, particularly when it comes to road closures, which is usually due to snow. And at that time, obviously, and others, we're working especially closely with Police Scotland, excuse me, when it comes to closing roads. And in that regard, we have an annual pre-winter meeting with other agencies in preparation for winter, just to talk through all the usual arrangements. And quite often, particularly in the other agencies, there's movement of staff, and so there's new officers involved. So it's a way of briefing them and opportunity to communicate prior to winter starting. Thanks, Chair.
So just to be clear, it's Bear's responsibility to clear the pavements in Kingussie, Newtonmore and Cromdale.
That's correct, and the main line in Dalwhinnie as well.
Okay. Any question here?
Thank you, Richard, as ever, for great detail. Just on the trunk road pavements, and bearing in mind we've got Bear and Amy now, I think we need to protect our own teams, and the public are not aware of that, and it's our own teams that chivvy your staff and our colleagues. So we need to get the information out there as to who does what, and I think as members it would be really helpful for us to, so that we can just go and extrapolate that information out. The other thing, again, to protect the teams, I think would be of benefit is there's a lot of criticism and noise made when a vehicle or can't get into a cul-de-sac or into local housing, and invariably it's because of parked cars. We have this problem with our waste teams as well, getting in. So I think again we need to do some public information. If cars are parked on the pavement and causing obstructions for vehicles to get down, they will not, they will struggle to get the facilities that they require, because I think we must make our messaging clear as well. And I think you've answered this question, but just to clarify for me, we have got enough in the team for the on-call rota now. You've got that extra member of staff, is that correct?
That's correct, yes. Thank you. It's a very good point. Well, they're all very good points. And the one there about parked cars, in addition to the footway one, yes, it's something we're always looking to improve our public-facing information on the website, and it's most useful that for officers and members in order to point the public towards that. If all the information's there, then it makes life so much easier. So there is a good amount of information there on the winter service, but we're always looking to ways that we can improve that. And equally, the one about parked cars, not just the web page, of course, but there's social media now. And as a council and as a service, we're getting ever better at using that option to get messages out to the public, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, for example. So thanks for that. Yeah, we'll take that one on board.
Thank you.
No one else? Okay. Richard got off easy today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. Members, here for that.
Item 11 on the agenda is the Glenmore PC update. And Debbie Sutton in attendance.
Bottom left.
Okay, Debbie, over to you, please.
Good morning, members. Thank you very much. Yes, so this is a short paper just to give a brief update as to where we are with the Glenmore PC project. And I do have a bit more of an update which has come in since we finalised the committee papers just with regards to the drainage. So initially this project was discussed back in 2021 when there was an opportunity to apply for some Better Places funding to increase public convenience provision. And we had discussed with members and looked to maybe put in a bid to either reinstate the Glenmore public convenience or to put in a new modular unit. But unfortunately, at that time, due to the timescales with the Better Places application, we weren't able to progress it. But what we wanted to do was further examine if that was going to be possible. And we discussed it with the Tourism Committee as part of the Visitor Management Fund and managed to secure £60,000 of funding towards the project, as well as match funding from the Cairngorm National Park Authority. So we have a total budget of £120,000 to put in a modular unit at the site. So we did establish a project board which is led through the Property and Facilities team. And we also have support and involvement from Forestry Land Scotland as our neighbour there on the site. You'll see as an appendix in the report the timeline of what's been happening. And although maybe on the ground it doesn't look like a lot's been going on, there's certainly a lot been going on in the background with regards to title checks and researching the ability to reinstate or to put in a modular unit at this location. And what we have identified via the project team is the issues with regards to the drainage at the site. So as part of the sort of due diligence before we install, we need to check that all the facilities there are going to be suitable. And unfortunately, on this occasion, we found that the drainage is not fit for purpose, and the current piping has a blockage or a number of blockages, and that's due to a number of reasons. So we have had some dye tests done in addition to the CCTV survey to try and establish what the cause of the issues are. And just prior to the paper going in for committee, we've managed to now get a bit more of an update, which I can provide to you verbally about what the engineers have established with regards to the issues. So there is, and it can be quite technical, so I don't have a huge amount of knowledge on it myself, but there's an issue with regards to the flow rates. And I'll just check the email here. So the drainage from the toilet block needs to achieve a fall of 1 in 60 in order to drain efficiently. And unfortunately, that's not what it has. So there are 3 options to overcome the blockage and damage. The first option, which would be a full replacement of the drainage, we don't feel is feasible just because of the cost and also because of the various issues that would be involved in the establishment of new drainage. The estimated cost, and I should say these are just estimates at the current time, is 25,000 for the first option. So we don't think, on discussion with the engineers, that that would be a viable option at this time. There are 2 further options to us. One is to install a pumping station along with the modular unit. This would come in at an estimated cost of around £7,000, but does have a regular ongoing annual maintenance cost, which can be significant depending on the amount of usage and could cause issues. So the third option we have is a treatment block on site, which would be slightly different to a pumping station, and it would mean the treatment is done actually on site before it's discharged into the pipes. So that cost is estimated at around £10,000 and is probably going to be the most realistic option for us at this stage. That's with regards to drainage. The other option, which we have discussed very briefly at our most recent meeting, and I should say we meet fortnightly with the project team, was to perhaps look at not having drainage at all and changing the modular unit to be a composting one. But like I say, that's in the very early stages for discussion. So that's really just to make members aware that that's one of the things we've looked at if the cost of the drainage is going to be unable to be met. Because originally in the project costs, we didn't have a price in for drainage because we assumed probably slightly naively that we would be able to use the existing drainage that's there, which is unfortunately not the case. So there is an issue with regards to funding for the additional option of with regards to drainage, which if we use a composting site, that wouldn't be the case. We're also looking at potentially maybe moving the unit slightly, depending on land ownership issues and whether or not we would be able to change the location of it so that we don't require the same drainage issues. But I'm happy to take any questions, and hopefully that's enough of an update for members just to bring you up to speed with where we are. But it is kind of ever evolving, if you like, and that's the situation at as of today's date.
Thank you, David. David, £10,000 doesn't seem a massive amount of money, and I suppose in £120,000 spent, 60 of which we're getting from the National Park. So I think it's a relatively minor thing to do. I would imagine composting toilets would be certainly less popular with the public, but that's just my own personal point of view. If you look at the timeline to progress to date, and maybe it's high time we did a lean review of all these sort of things, because the number of steps involved is quite long, to say the least. But we'll just leave it at that for now. John?
Now, I was asking about the composting. Does that require maintenance?
Yes, as far as I know, it would require some maintenance, but it would operate on the same basis. That would be a modular unit, but the distribution of the effluent, if you like, would go into the composting site, but I don't know a huge amount about them because we don't have any currently that are council operated, although we have supported some within the communities, which I believe work very well in more rural areas. But there certainly would be some maintenance involved.
I'm sure Forest and Land Scotland will be able to tell you because they operate a composting toilet and not that far away in the summer. Any other questions?
Yes. Thank you, Debbie. It's just a bit disappointing. There are so many variables that have come in that we hadn't necessarily anticipated. It's happened, so we've got to deal with it. There is a lot of misconceptions about composting toilets, but should we be in discussion with the National Park because it fits in with their environmental ethos? I would have thought. So, you know, and if there's a land ownership issue, that always raises our concern. That raises concerns with me as well. So we need to look at the best solution for what we've got just now to get going, so to speak, or move forward. And composting certainly, I would have thought, would have been a good fit for the National Park.
No one else? So, Debbie, I think the thing you need to take away is that this new toilet needs to be up and running for spring next year.
Yeah.
At the absolute latest. It's desperately needed and will certainly help in alleviating the problem in Glenmore. So really, it needs to be done. I don't know where you find the 10 grand from, but you know there has to be some way. But it needs to be done, and it needs to be done within the next 12 months. But not within the next 12 months, by spring next year. So by Easter next year, there needs to be a brand new toilet box in there. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That leaves us with the minutes. Can we agree the minutes? Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you everybody for attending. It's the end of the day.